If you're watching this, it means that you qualified for the expedited retake of your SOL. What that means is that you are so close to passing. You need maybe only 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 more questions to make sure that you pass. And of course, it's important that you pass because that's how you get your diploma. You have to have verified credits. So, this PowerPoint is going to walk you through some of the questions that might have just made that difference between passing and not. The first thing that I want to mention is that when we talk about reading, a lot of people say to me things like, oh, I know exactly what reading is. You're just reading the words on the page. That's not what they're testing here. So let me walk you through what reading and the reading SOL actually looks at. The first thing that they want you to do is to know what words mean. Now, they don't expect you to have these memorized. They're going to give you words with context clues to help you figure out what they mean. Don't just guess. In every question, they have given you the information to figure out this hard word, even if you've never seen it before in your life. The second thing that reading looks at is why certain words are used and whether they're appropriate or not. Right? Think about it. We speak differently depending on the context. So if I'm answering the phone for my friends, I might say, "What's up?" or "What's good?" right? If I'm speaking to my boss, however, when I answer the phone, it'll be more like, "Good morning, how may I help you?" So we use different words in different contexts at different times. And of course, you have to know whether they work in the situation or whether they're not quite appropriate. They don't really fit that situation. The last thing that they're going to ask you to do in part of the first section is to identify literary terms. They're going to want things that are not meant to be taken literally, right? So using like, as, or than, you're not comparing things to something that actually exists. You're saying that it's like something. So again, anything not meant to be taken literally follows under those categories of figurative language. And those are the literary terms that they're going to ask you about, similes and metaphors. And again, not only where they are, but why would the author use these particular things? Think about it. It makes sense. In a text, the author is going to use imagery. Why? Because again, if it's a written text, they want to provide a vivid mental picture. So not only do you have to be able to pick it out, you also have to say why it would be used. When we talk about reading, they want you to be able to read different kinds of things, right? Different genres. A genre is a type. So if I ask you what genre of music you like, it's what type of music you like. So on the SOL, the genres that they're going to be asking you about are fiction, right? They're going to want you to read a selection from a short story or a novel or maybe even a play. And they want you to know certain things about that genre, right? You know, if you're reading a short story, for example, you need to look at the characters. There's going to be a plot or a climax. There's going to be a setting where it takes place, a theme, a purpose, right? Or there's also going to be some symbols that the author uses to convey that message, right? So they want you to know the different parts of that genre or type. They also want you to be able to read through the selection and find examples that would back that up. So if you're going to say that the character is cruel, how could you go through and find an example of that cruelty? So again, they want you to be able to do more than just simply read. They're asking you to analyze, to pick things apart. They're also going to ask you to read some nonfiction pieces. So they might ask you to read an autobiography or a memoir. They might ask you to read print material like directions or instructions or a website or something that's informational like a how-to guide. And as you're reading, they want you to do some evaluation. Is the material accurate and reliable? Can you make an inference? An inference is drawing a conclusion. What can you infer? So if somebody texts you back K after a really long message, you can infer that they're either angry with you or they're busy. That's an inference. It's a conclusion that you draw. They want you to be able to use the information to answer questions. They're also going to ask you about why it's structured the way it is and how it's structured. How is it structured? Is it chronologically, like first, second, next? Is it compare and contrast? How is it organized? And just like with the fiction stuff, can you identify some of the techniques that the author uses and explain why these are used? Even in a nonfiction piece, you might need some imagery. So again, can you pick out those techniques and say why they're being used? In determining the meaning of words, they're always going to provide you with a context clue. A context clue is either a definition, so they'll define the word, they'll give you an example, or they'll give you a contrast. So take a look at these. And again, oftentimes people will just click on any old answer because they go, I've never seen that word before in my entire life. They know that. They want to know how well you can read, which means to make that inference about what the word means. So the woman was magnanimous and always gave to charity. You might not know the word magnanimous, but if somebody always gives to charity, you know that they're charitable or kind or generous. And that's what magnanimous means. It means generous or giving. Here's another example. I often find myself aghast or disgusted. They defined it for you. Aghast means disgusted by people with poor manners. So again, they're giving you the word in there. So don't get perplexed. Don't get confused. They're giving you the answer. Here's a contrast. Unlike John, who was fastidious, Lisa was messy. So again, if Lisa is messy, John is clean or organized or careful, which is what fastidious means. They're also going to ask you about the roots, prefixes, and suffixes in words. A prefix is something that comes before a word, or it gives before the root, and gives you insight into the meaning of the word. The most common prefixes are im and in, which means not. Like incorrect means not correct. Impolite means not polite. Or re, which means again. To redo something means you do it again. Therefore, to regenerate means to do or to grow something again or generate it again. All right? The suffixes at the end of words like able or able. So again, if you have a word like impossible, pos is the root, im means not, and able is able to. So again, impossible means not able to. They are often going to give you extra information, like the root comes from Latin or Greek. It doesn't matter where it comes from. They're giving you extra information to see if they can kind of confuse you or to trick you into thinking you don't know the answer. They will always give you the information that you need. Just read and decode. You're a sleuth, right? You're solving a mystery. They're also going to ask you about connotation and denotation. Denotation is the dictionary definition. So if I looked something up in the dictionary, it's what that particular word means. So again, the dictionary definition of a pig is going to be a barnyard animal, right? The connotation is the meaning that a word suggests, right? So we have a lot of things that the word pig suggests. Somebody who's sloppy or fat or overweight or a glutton. All of those are a pig, or a chauvinist, right? Somebody who doesn't like women. So the connotation is the meaning a word suggests. So think about it, the difference between average and mediocre. There's a reason that the song says, I don't want no mediocre, I don't want no mediocre, right? Mediocre, the connotation is bad. Whereas average, the connotation is okay or acceptable, right? So the connotation is the meaning that a word suggests, right? So again, we have to be careful because sometimes when we have a word, it might be considered a little bit too informal. So again, idiomatic phrases are considered too informal. Think about it. When you're seated there after passing your SOL next year at graduation, right? Because you've already passed all these SOLs. When they greet the audience, they're not going to say, what's up? They're going to say, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So again, certain things are not considered formal enough. So sometimes it's the connotation, the meaning that a word suggests. So figurative language is anything that's not meant to be taken literally. So idioms are, again, anything that you couldn't translate if you had an English to alien dictionary. There's lots of things that are idiomatic expressions, like raining cats and dogs, the short end of the stick. Again, all of those are examples of idioms. Somebody with an English dictionary trying to translate it wouldn't be able to. Those are idioms. A conceit is an extended metaphor. It's a metaphor that goes on and on and on and creates that comparison. The band Gym Class Heroes has a song called My Heart's a Stereo. And throughout the song, he talks about how his heart's like a record that has a couple of cracks. And he says, don't get mad at me if you have to buy Mad D batteries, right? So again, he's continuing that metaphor on and on and on. That's a conceit. Metaphors are direct comparisons, saying something is something else, right? So my heart is a stereo, whereas a simile is like. Hyperbole is exaggeration. So think about all the times where we use extreme exaggeration, right? That test was so hard, it was like all my brains fell out on the page. Well, literally that didn't happen. So again, all of these are examples of different types of figurative language. So look for those places where you can't take something literally, where again, they're comparing something, but again, it's not literal. So again, when you're looking for those literary terms, look for like, as, or than, which would make it a simile, or a direct comparison, which would make it a metaphor, right? My dad is a bear when you wake him up in the morning. Again, literally, right? The dictionary definition of a bear is a big animal, but again, here we're using it to mean somebody who's extremely grumpy. An analogy is a four-part comparison, saying something is to something as something is to something else, right? So again, in the Blake Shelton song, Honeybee, he says, you be my little Loretta, I'll be your Conway Twitty. You be this and I'll be that. It's creating a four-part comparison. That's an analogy. They're also going to ask you about some literary terms that deal with universal characters called archetypes. Archetypes are patterns or models that you find in like every story. So think about this. Every story, there's always the hero, right? The one hero who's going on some kind of a quest. There's always the villain, the bad guy. There's always the beauty, the beautiful woman, right? The princess that they're going after. And in almost every movie, there's that wise elder figure, right? The Obi-Wan Kenobi or the Dumbledore or the figure like in Lord of the Rings with Gandalf, that wise elder that gives advice. Or even like Mr. Miyagi in the story of the Karate Kid. So again, the wise elder, the hero, the villain, the beauty, those are all archetypes. If you have trouble thinking about archetypes, just think about the characters of the Smurfs, right? There's Papa Smurf, who's the wise elder. The hero is Hefty. There's the beauty in Smurfette. And the villain, of course, is Gargamel. And again, the villain usually has a sidekick as well. All of those are archetypes. And sometimes they call them universal characters. That's what they mean. They mean those characters that you find in every story. So here are some examples so that you can see how they're used. So they ask you to read this sentence, right? And again, they're looking for a literary term. So look for places where things are not meant to be taken literally. He swung wide around an anonymous heap of metal, being swallowed by a greedy mound of blackberry brambles, and came to an abrupt halt. What's the one thing that's not literal in this sentence? Obviously, if you pick the fact that the blackberry brambles, right, are not swallowing metal, it can't literally do that, right, then you know that this is personification, right, giving something that's not human a human quality. Apostrophe is, again, speaking to something that can't reply. So if you stub your toe and you say, "Stupid desk, why are you in my way?" That's apostrophe, right? A metaphor is something else, and a symbol is something that stands for something else. So again, the trick is to look for the thing that you can't take literally. In this case, it's that personification, giving the blackberry brambles the ability to swallow the metal. So they ask a lot about idioms because we use them all the time. So your mom or dad yells at you and says, "That's the last straw." Somebody with an Alien to English dictionary would say, why are there straws? What straws? Why is this the last one? Go buy more straws. So again, the last straw. I'm heartbroken. Literally, your heart can't break. If you are under the weather, right? Under what weather are you? That does not make sense. So again, at the drop of the hat, he fights at the drop of a hat. Why are you dropping hats, right? So again, something that is not meant to be taken literally is an idiom. And again, a lot of our slang, right, if you talk about getting in your whip or whatever and you're using it as car, is an idiomatic expression. It's something not meant to be taken literally. Another literary term that they ask about is irony. Irony creates a moment of ha ha. It's a humorous kind of contrast, a contrast between what you say and what you mean, sort of like being sarcastic. So if you see the ugliest outfit you've ever seen and you say, "My, that is a stunning outfit," and you really mean stunning is hideous, right? That is verbal irony. But again, it's a form of irony. A contrast between what is expected and what happens. Somebody in a story wins the lottery and then drops dead after his dreams come true. That's a contrast between what's expected and what happens. When characters don't live happily ever after. There's a fairy tale called The Paper Bag Princess. And at the very end, the princess saves herself. And when the prince comes to see her, she rejects him and says, "Nope, I don't think I'm going to get married." That's a contrast between what you expect in princess stories, right? That they're going to get married and live happily ever after, and what actually happens, right? Another example of irony is when the audience knows something that the characters do not. So again, it could be ironic when you know that the killer is hiding in the closet. And again, the characters don't know that. But again, it creates a moment of ha ha or oops, right? Look for those moments if they ask you about irony. Here are some different examples. And I know you didn't read the story, but again, you kind of look for the moment where there's that contrast, right? So again, this one says, "Is this irony? Benjamin can hear the noise over all of the other noises." Does that make you go like, ha ha ha? No. The artist initially appears hostile, but then warms up to him. Right? The artist is amused and invites him to return, right? Benjamin initially thinks his neighborhood is quiet, and then learns that an artist is noisily constructing a piece of art nearby. So again, he thinks at the very beginning of the story, "Wow, I live in a quiet neighborhood," and then poof, there's all kinds of noise. That's the kind of irony, right? The contrast between what you expect, a nice quiet day, and then you have this noise that ruins it. That's the moment of like, ha ha, right? So look for that when you're looking for irony. When they ask you to analyze the language, they want you to be able to do the following. Pick out the main idea. What is this thing all about? They also want you to pick out those literary terms, so look for things that can't be taken literally. They want you to be able to compare and contrast which is like and which is not alike. They also want you to be able to figure out the author's purpose or position. What side are they on? If you had to say, this person is arguing for this, what would you say they're arguing for, right? Or what is their purpose? Are they informing, explaining, or entertaining, right? You also need to be able to look at the reliability of their information. Do they have facts? Do they have backup for their information? Or again, are they making things that you couldn't verify, like big general statements, like many people like chocolate ice cream, right? How would you verify that, right? Something that you can verify or that is reliable means that it's accurate, right? How do I know that many people like chocolate ice cream, right? That would be something that would be hard to verify, where if I said that there were 6.7 billion tubs of chocolate ice cream sold, again, you can infer from that that people do like chocolate ice cream because, again, there's some data, there's some hard facts in there. So again, with nonfiction, they're going to ask you about characters and characterizations. So again, you should know those pattern characters like the wise one, the beautiful one, the hero, the villain. You also need to know where the author creates characterization. Direct is where they tell you about their personality. So John is mean. He is cruel. He likes to kill puppies. Right? That's direct. The author tells you about the personality. Indirect is where they describe clothing, where they describe actions, right? So you need to know both types of characterization. And you also need to think about how the author's word choice helps to create this image of the character. They're also going to ask you about point of view. Is it first person? First person, look at the one. It looks like an I. In first person, I is the speaker, right? So I am tired today. I went here. That's first person. Third, right, is using he or she, right? There's no I as the speaker. Limited means you only know one person's perspective. Omniscient means that the narrator knows all. Omni means all, and scient means all seeing or all knowing, right? So limited knows only one character. Omniscient sees everybody's thoughts. So here's an example, and here are some of the kinds of questions that they're going to ask you, right? So the gate screamed a shrill squee and swung open, right? The gate screamed. Do gates actually scream? Nope, that's personification. You know they're going to ask you a question about that. And why would it be used, right? A shrill squee, it's setting the mood. What is the mood so far? Like a horror story, right? Dark and spooky. It swung open unexpectedly, making him stumble into a stack of bars that clattered helter-skelter to the ground around him. So again, look at all the words. It's providing imagery. Where'd the bars go? They went everywhere, right? When Benjamin regained his balance, he found the woman standing tall in front of him. Who might you be? She asked, scowling, removing her ear protection and looking him straight in the eye. And why are you wreaking havoc in my yard? So again, they could ask, what do you know about this character, right? This figure, the woman, the she. Well, she's scowling. She looks him straight in the eye, so she's not afraid. And again, she confronts him pretty directly, so you know she's bold, right? What about Benjamin, right? The first thing that he does is to stumble into a stack of bars when he gets scared, so he's not quite as sure of himself. He shifted from foot to foot under the woman's intent gaze and thought about walking away. Again, he's nervous. How do we know? Because he does that shifty kind of back and forth with his foot, right? You might not know what intent means, but again, if she's looking him straight in the eye, intent means serious. So that's how you need to read when you read this test. Start taking it apart, right? Don't just read the words, be actively engaged. And sometimes people will say, well, that's just too much work. But if you don't, you have to go back and reread. So again, reread and pick it apart. think of yourself as the paragraph surgeon. You're going to go in and you're going to tear it all apart, right? Benjamin is a character. She is a character, right? We know that this is third person, right? We also know, again, that it's limited because we don't know what this woman necessarily is thinking, right? We only know Benjamin, right? Benjamin is saying, I live this, this is how I feel. So again, we only see from his perspective, so that's limited, right? So again, right, the woman spoke sharply. So we know that she's not a very nice lady. You should be able to pick up on all of those kinds of things. Benjamin blushed and apologized, right? He is not a very strong kind of character, right? He's a little shy. Those are all things that you need to be picking apart because they're going to ask you questions about each of those things. So here's an example of a question that they're going to ask you about characterization. It says, pick the words that best reveal Benjamin's attempt to gain the artist's trust, right? So again, craning his head, he's peeking, right? Peeking and craning your head don't inspire trust, right? That's kind of stalkerish, right? He answered politely, right? That's definitely an attempt to get somebody's trust. Waving his hand vaguely, all right? That's not going to get somebody's trust there. He blushed and apologized. If you're trying to get somebody's trust, saying sorry is definitely the way to do it. So again, as you read, they're going to ask you questions to infer. To infer means to read something and then to draw conclusions, right? So again, you can draw conclusions that politely and apologize would be good ways to gain somebody's trust here, especially since she's very standoffish when they meet. So again, here's a question where they ask about limited, meaning you only know it from one person's point of view, right? Omniscient, all-knowing. So again, it's not seeing everybody's thoughts. So the dialogue, that doesn't have anything to do with thoughts. The emphatic response, that has nothing to do with that. Details that reveal Benjamin's thoughts. There it goes. So again, they're not even asking you anything other than, do you know that limited omniscient deals with the revealing of a character's thoughts? Has nothing to do with setting, right? Has nothing to do with any of that. Again, it's the thoughts. So in this, they're actually asking you for a definition if you think about it. What is limited omniscient? It's revealing a character's thoughts, a single character's thoughts at that. So throughout these, they're going to ask you about the theme, if it's a fiction text, or the main idea. A theme is a message. So technology is dangerous and might overtake us all if we're not careful. That's a message. A main idea is the topic about which they're discussing. So again, in the next selection that we're going to see, they're talking about a stadium. That's the main idea. They're talking about the construction of the stadium. Whereas in fiction, sometimes they'll ask you to dig for an unstated or implied. Implied means you don't directly say something. So again, they'll ask you for a theme, which is a message. So if it's nonfiction, it's the topic. What are they talking about? Keep in mind they're going to use words like implied, which means to suggest, right? Or infer, which means that you have to pick it out. It's not directly stated, right? Sometimes it can be directly stated. But they're also going to ask you to differentiate between the main idea and then the supporting details. What is the support for that main claim or main idea? So if my main claim is that school food needs to change, my supporting details might be the number of meals that are returned or the cases of food illness that comes from eating these. What is supporting that one main idea? They're also going to ask you how nonfiction is arranged, right? And what it does. When they ask you about the purpose, it's one of these. To inform. Are they telling you about something? To persuade, do they want to convince you of an idea, right? Are they explaining a why, or are they telling a story, which is a narrative? So they're going to ask you the what it is, and then they're going to ask you how it's structured. So the what is the purpose. So informing somebody, or arguing something, right? Persuading people, or explaining or telling a story. When they organize it, it can be chronological. Chrono refers to time. So this is something that's in order in time. So first, second, next. That can be a plot, or that could be like steps of things. So if we're talking about the building of the stadium, I can talk about the first things that they did, then the next things that they did, and then the final touches, and today. That's chronological. Are they comparing and contrasting? Do I talk about one stadium's features and then another stadium's features? Words that you might not know are refutation or rebuttal. That's where somebody's going to take an argument and say, yeah, I know, but, right? Look at the word rebuttal. It's got but in it, right? Rebutting is arguing against something. So mom says you cannot go on this field trip. Your rebuttal is saying like, yeah, I should be allowed to go because. That's the rebuttal, right? Counter argument is another thing. What would you say against those same people? So again, someone says that file sharing and downloading should be illegal. What's the counter argument to that? How could you argue against that? Sometimes they'll put in the counter argument and then refute that. Don't be thrown off by the words refute, which means to say no, or rebuttal, right? To rebut is just simply to argue against something, right? So your teacher says, you're rude. Your rebuttal would be, no, I'm not. Here's why, right? So that's your rebuttal. As you look at the text, they're going to want you to do the following, right? Evaluate the accuracy of it. How factual is it? They want to see concrete, verifiable facts, not generalizations. So again, something is not accurate when you say many people like swimming, right? Something more accurate would be how many people took lessons at the YMCA in America last year. That's more accurate, right? So accuracy is something that's on target, on point, right? They're also going to ask you how the argument, or if it is persuasive. Are they trying to change your mind about something? What's the tone? The tone is the author's attitude towards a subject. Words like cynical, right, means sarcastic, right? If I said something, if I hate math and I say, oh, math is just my favorite hour and a half to waste in torment, right? I'm not being serious. I'm being sarcastic or rude, right? Or cynical, right? Those are negative words. Optimistic is an optimistic or positive word, right? So they're going to ask you about the author's tone. Is it neutral, right? Or are they mad about something? They're also going to make you make inferences about that tone, right? So if I say, this isn't fair with an exclamation point, right? You can infer that I'm angry about something if I use that exclamation point. I care enough about it to emphasize it. So they're going to ask you to make inferences about the author's tone. Remember, to infer is just to deduce, right? Or figure out something that's not directly stated, right? You infer things all day, every day. You come in and your teacher has her hands on her hips and she's got that face on, right? You can infer just from that she's angry or upset about something, right? So to infer means to conclude, to deduce, to figure out. So here's an example, and we're going to do a little bit of critical reading as we go through, right? The stadium in Phoenix, where the Arizona Cardinals football team plays, can be open to the elements on comfortable days or closed when the need arises. So again, the stadiums can be open or closed. The roof retracts or pulls back on conveyor belts. Look, they've given you the definition here. Retracts means or pulls back. They're going to ask you that question about what can you figure out about that word. There's the context clue right there. The grass playing field also moves on rollers, so the grass can be moved outside to a full growth-enhancing sunlight and back inside for a wind-free football game. So again, what would you infer? Why did they move it outside? Look, full growth enhancing sunlight. So they move it outside to grow and then back inside to play. The field, grass, dirt, and watering system is embedded in a giant metal sheet that has been compared to a cookie sheet. Again, it's not meant to be taken literally. It's an analogy. What is this thing like? It's like a cookie sheet. So again, the stadium is to its metal sheet the way a cookie is on a cookie sheet. That's an analogy. Motorized rollers move at the rate of 0.8 miles an hour. So again, 0.8 of a mile. So this whole paragraph is just about the roof, right, and the field. The building materials are also specialized. So again, this is about the materials here. This is about the building materials, right? So again, if they ask you how it's organized by materials. It's not chronological. Besides the concrete, some of these use energy-saving materials, right? The roof, for example, is made of fabric and fiberglass and Teflon. While the roof is only as thick as denim jeans, as thick as, right? This is a simile, as thick as jeans, it is strong, right? So again, they're going to ask you about that simile. Jumping on it would feel like bouncing on the world's largest trampoline. Again, that's another simile. Jumping on it is like what? The largest trampoline. Here's a metaphor. The outside skin of the building, right? A building doesn't actually literally have skin. It's comparing it to the skin of a human being, right? So this is how you need to read the passages. Read them carefully. I know that it can be a little bit of work, but some of you guys are only 2 questions away from passing this test and not having to take it again. You have to pass this test to graduate. Take the time and read carefully. So again, here are some questions, right? And they ask you to make some inferences, right? They ask you to infer what you know, right? They also ask you some questions where which thing would be the hardest to support, right? When you're looking at something that's hard to support, figure out how would you back that up factually, right? So let's start here. How would you back this up factually? In places with harsh winters, late season football games can be rather chilly, right? You'd back that up how? You'd look up forecasts. You'd look up the temperature. You could get lots of facts for that. Inventive architects have always welcomed the opportunity to face such challenges throughout history. How would you get that information? You'd have to go through and it says have always, right? You'd have to interview every architect throughout history. Is anybody going to be able to do that? That's the one that would be the hardest to back up. That is the one that is the least reliable. Look at the other ones. Futuristic stadiums are opening. You could find that online. The stadium can be open or closed. It told you that. This, the choice B, is the one that would be most difficult to back up. As you're taking the test, right, read carefully. Slash and trash. Get rid of the ones that you know absolutely are not the answer. If you're still not sure, reread the question and make sure you haven't missed something. Right? Select carefully. Remember, many of you need only 1 or 2 more correct to pass. So that means if you don't just guess, but you know the answer to 2 more, you're almost guaranteed to pass this test. Now, I want you to think very carefully about the questions that you had difficulty with, the ones that you were uncertain about when you took it the first time. What were some of the questions that you didn't remember or that you didn't know the answer to that you can remember so that you know what to review? Again, take your time, be careful, and you'll pass for sure this time, and that's what we want to see.